So it felt like the obvious winner for Game of the Year before the year even started was Tears of the Kingdom.
True.
Then Baldur's Gate came along.
I think Chained Echoes and Sea of Stars might have a very good chance of taking some indie stuff because these are some good indie games.
I think Resident Evil 4 Remake is going to be there.
But for Xbox, definitely Starfield. Starfield is where it is at for that system right now.
Zelda fans, if it ain't going to be Game of the Year, they're going to make a Game of the Year. They're going to campaign for it. They're going to have signs for it. Vote Link for Game of the Year on your yard one day like it's a politician or something.
Yo, what's poppin', everybody? We back with the No Level Cap podcast, back once again with the crew to talk about all the anime, all the gaming, all the nerd culture, none of the bullshit. I want y'all to give me just a second to introduce my incredible co-host. We've got the living cartoon and the man with the golden voice, Rakeem Beck. What's going on, Rakeem?
Today I have been, I'm going to start the story a little earlier. I woke up at 8 o'clock this morning from a call from my little brother, and he said, hey, man, get on that Baldur's Gate. And I was like, Baldur's Gate? That doesn't come out till a few days from now. He said, no. Early access is today. I looked it up. He was right. So I actually went ahead and just purchased Baldur's Gate early. I was intending to buy it, literally just buy it the day it came out or a little bit after, because I do have a lot of games. But since I've literally promised my brother I would play this game with him for like 4 years, I couldn't say no. You know what I'm saying? So we spent pretty much all day just getting to play Baldur's Gate. We had a lot of fun. He did a whole bunch of stuff. I remember I took a lunch break, and while I was eating my lunch, I was watching him on the screen, like leveling up. We get random party members. I didn't know who they were. He fighting the enemies off in the distance, and my character was just on the screen like, wow, he's doing some amazing things when I'm not looking. So yeah, I had a lot of fun today with Baldur's Gate. And speaking of that, I think it's going to tie in nicely to our conversation today. So I'm looking forward to it.
Hey, that's what I'm talking about. I'm glad y'all got a chance to enjoy it. I'm glad that Baldur's Gate 3 continues to be just the big surprise of pretty much of the year so far. I'm looking forward to checking that out at some point myself later in the year. Next up, we've got the One Punch Man and the Master Combos, Devin Butts. What's going on, Devin?
I'm good, man. Much like Rakeem, I'm also, for the most part, been kind of enthralled in a few games. Sea of Stars came out a few days ago, and it's been pretty good so far. I gotta say, man, these indie RPGs, man, they out here, they punching, man, they swinging. I know these big AAA RPGs doing their thing too. You know, King just mentioned Baldur's Gate, but these indie studios, they like, hey, man, we here too, man. And that actually, for me, might kind of tie into our conversation as well. Just been playing that mainly. Like, I really haven't been this enthralled in like RPGs in a good while, and it feels good to just, you know, play some really solid RPGs, especially some new ones. Because at a point in my life, I was like Final Fantasy. That was it. So, you know, as I got older, just started playing different games, and I've been enjoying this year, man.
Okay. Brother, going that Sea of Stars, that if I have to look at another pixel-based game, I'm gonna vomit. But I'm glad that everybody else does seem to like really fuck with like not just this game, yeah, just like that. I'm really trying to force myself through Trails to Azure. I love the commitment to the bit. It is incredible. I'm really trying to force myself through Trails to Azure before I actually do. Like, hey, man, I can't fucking do none of this shit. No fucking more. I'm
Pixelist.
I'm pixelist. You right. I'm anti-pixel. You got to get that shit out of here. I can't take it no more. Like, I'm tired of looking at all these SNES knockoffs. Like, let's move on. Let's get some better graphics. It ain't got to look like no damn Horizon, but like it can we get, I don't know, some Cold Steel 4 level graphics? I'll take that. Shit, something. But I'm getting off track. We got the Collective Collectors, the master of Twitch, Will Coleman, another pixel lover. What's going on, Will?
Today I've been called a pixel lover. Ain't that some shit? Look, I'm be real with you. I've been trying to get back into more of my games. I just bought Sea of Stars and I bought WrestleQuest this week. So I'm definitely doing Sea of Stars soon. When I get done with that, I'm definitely going to hop on the WrestleQuest, because how you going to sit up here and make a game with JRPG qualities and then you throw wrestling on top of that, and I see legends being represented in this game? You got my attention now. I'm ready. I love wrestling. I love JRPGs. Now you really speaking to my spirit. Oh, and before I get off, got another piece.
What the hell is that?
Rhapsody.
Oh,
Rhapsody.
Rhapsody.
Yeah, that
Oh,
is.
Rhapsody.
Yeah, I did hear that they re-released that, right?
Yep. This ain't even a re-release. This is our first time ever getting these 2 games in the States.
Oh, really? Okay.
Huh.
Yes,
Wow.
we never got these. We got
They're
the
like
first
2
game.
and 3.
Yep, 2 and 3. We never
Oh.
got the sequels, but we got the first game on PS1 and DS, but we never got these. So
I just want to
got the
quickly
collector's
mention
edition.
I like how Will just reached down and just pull out something like he got a dark hole of RPGs he just pulls from.
Like
Probably.
reached in the hammer space and was like, here we go. There we go. Lastly, we got the Black Daredevil, a secret weapon, a no-level cap, Terrence Flowers. What's good, Terrence?
Week was an interesting one for me. The first half of it was good, but then I got a little cold Wednesday. I've gotten over it now, but yeah, first part of it was good. Second half of it was a little bit of recovery. In terms of games for me, I might as well just wait until like that holiday rush, like Black Friday window to start just buying everything on discount because I'm not going to play it, so I'll just wait.
I respect the honesty.
Got the backlog.
I'll just play the long game.
Smart man.
Smart man, truthfully.
Yeah, it's smart of me because I just dropped. Well, I only paid $60, but I still dropped like $60 on Starfield so I could play it on Wednesday. Speaking of, lastly, of course, yeah, I am Sage Ashford, the man who won't shut up. I've been playing a lot of games lately. I've been getting into like older games. So I've been playing Trails to Azure as I try to finish up my part of my Trails journey. I've been getting back into Judgment, getting ready for Like a Dragon Gaiden to come out later this fall. And I've been I've been back on that Power Wash Simulator life, man. They sent me to another part of Muckingham, and I'm also waiting on that Back to the Future DLC that's about to come out, and that's gonna provide me probably hours of just entertainment as I like listen to podcasts and just enjoy the fun of watching things slowly get cleaned. If you didn't know, No Level Cap goes live every Monday morning. We're on YouTube for video fans, but if you prefer the audio version, we're live on Spotify as well. And so now, we all talked about what games that we always talk about what games we're playing as we start up the podcast. But like, it's an interesting seg this time because it's been such a fantastic year for video games. Like probably easily the best year since I would say 2018. Some people might say 2017. Either way, it's been 5-6 years since we've had a year in video games this strong. Like last year was solid. This year is incredible, like just banger after banger after banger. And so that leads us to a very interesting conversation where we have to decide what's going to be the Game of the Year nominees. Not even Game of the Year. What are the nominees? Like, it's so complex. Like, this year has been filled with so many bangers that it's not just enough to ask, like, oh, what's going to get Game of the Year and what's going to get screwed out? Like, no, what's going to get screwed out of being Game of the Year? Nominees. Like, what's going to get screwed out of the nominees? And so I wanted to ask y'all what y'all think are going to be, like, some of the nominees. Typically, for the Game Awards, it's 6 nominees. Usually, it's a Sony game, a Microsoft game, or for the last couple of years, it's been a Sony game, a Microsoft game, a Nintendo game. And then you'll get some mix of third-party and indie games, usually at least one indie game to round it all out, at least for the last 2 or 3 years. And so I wanted to see where y'all land and what y'all think are going to be some of the nominees, if not all of the nominees. Do you have like you can have locks, you can have 3 games, you can have 6 games. I don't care, but I just wanted to see where y'all are landing right now with like what are going to be some of the Game of the Year nominees. Devin, where are you at, man?
So I'm gonna just go ahead and say for Sony, I think that Spider-Man 2 is probably gonna be that. It's probably at this point, I think it's gonna be the sure spot for that Game of the Year nominee from Sony side of things. Like later on this year, I don't really know what else is gonna necessarily be coming close to that from PlayStation. Everybody's looking forward to it. It's been a big build up for this sequel, so I think that one's got it off the rip. I think I'm gonna give Xbox. I'm gonna go ahead and say Starfield. I think Starfield has a really good shot to be that game. I mean, it's the game that people are talking about. It's the game that's been talked about for so long for Xbox in general. So I think it's gonna be the game that'll probably be on the list for Microsoft. Nintendo, again, this is kind of to me, I feel like a no-brainer. Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. Another game that was talked about. Herald came out, great review scores. So I think that's kind of a shoe-in for that nominee. And it's kind of just like last year. It's always up there. Usually Zelda's up there. So I don't think this year will be any different for Nintendo. Now for some other ones, I personally think that I just mentioned Sea of Stars and I mentioned Chain Echoes. Well, I mentioned Sea of Stars. On the indie side of things, I'm not gonna lie, man, because I know we talked about Chain Echoes. I asked it, would it qualify for this year because it came out so late last year in 2023 or 2022 rather. I think
Yes,
Chain
it would.
Echoes, I think Chain Echoes and Sea of Stars might have a very good chance of taking some indie stuff because when I tell you these games, I've beaten Chain Echoes. I put like 88 hours into Chain Echoes, and I'm like 9 hours into Sea of Stars. And I'm a big RPG fan. These are some good indie games. I know there's some other things out there that's on the horizon, but I don't know, man. These games are so well done that I feel like they might have a good spot of taking whatever indie award it is. But I could be wrong. But at the very least, they'll at least be in the conversation, I feel, if they don't get it. I got some other games on my Baldur's Gate. I think that'll definitely be in the conversation. Like that was kind of a game that kind of hit people in the side of the head. It's like, oh snap, Baldur's Gate, and this is like the record breaking that it did like for the concurrent player. So that alone right there should show you like that's gonna be in the conversation, no doubt. So I think I have a few other, but I think those are like the main ones that I feel are gonna be like locked in, like shoe-ins for game of the year. So yeah.
That's a solid list. I think a lot of us are gonna have some stuff in common with that list.
Yeah.
I do want to see. I'm very curious to see because I think Chained Echoes might get squeezed out a little bit just because it is one of those games that came out last year.
Yeah.
A lot of times the games that come out in that last November, December spot kind of get screwed unless the category itself is weak or the game is just, it makes that much of a impact on the community. That's when those games, they come back up like, oh yeah, this it didn't quite make the date last time, but like, because I think the Game Awards last year was either December, it was like early December, and Chained Echoes came out literally like December 8th. So there was no way it was going to be included last year. This year, it has a strong chance if people look, but like you never really know. And I would feel bad for it just because it's like one of those games that's just like to see such high reviews for it, and then for people to be like, oh yeah, I forgot about it. Like that would be sad. Keem, what do you stand, man?
Yeah, so this was a very strong year this year. So this is gonna be largely the same as Devin's. I almost feel like this year is so strong that they should maybe add like one extra like entry for the Game of the Year category just to kind of spread it out a bit because there's a lot of games that could be in contention. So I kind of did it by consoles. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, without a doubt, because of the conversation they had. And also thinking back to, if I'm not mistaken, Breath of the Wild also won Game of the Year. It came out, if I'm not. Yeah, so it's coming into this almost like the reigning champ to the sequel to one of the greatest video games considered of all time. And of course, we've had the conversation between you and I multiple times that Zelda fans, if it ain't gonna be Game of the Year, they're gonna make a Game of the Year. They're gonna campaign for it. They're gonna have signs for it. Vote Link for Game of the Year on your yard one day, like he's a politician or something. So yes, definitely Tears of the Kingdom. I think another game that could be in that contention as well for Nintendo, the new Super Mario Brothers game coming out just in a few months. I think the quality of those Mario games is very high. I think this game's going to review well. I think it's going to sell well. I think it's going to do well. And just like, what was it, Vampire Survivors was last year, you don't have to have a giant open world game to get nominated. You just need a good, solid experience that people enjoy. And the gameplay loop of Mario has lasted since, basically the earliest heydays of successful top levels modern consoles. So I think Mario Wonders should be considered for that category. I think it could actually get in there. For PlayStation, Spider-Man 2, without a doubt. I actually also believe, Spider-Man 2, I think for quality wise, I think going off of the last game, and the amount of time and impact that Sony puts into their big first party titles. God of War was this game last year, where it's like it's really, really good. If Elden Ring didn't exist, it probably would have won Game of the Year. It was a very good chance it would have won Game of the Year. So I feel like Spider-Man 2, ironically, might be in that same category. If Zelda didn't come out this year, Spider-Man 2 might be Game of the Year.
Spider-Man has that problem every time too. Like Spider-Man and Horizon always wind up getting squeezed out some kind of way.
Yeah. It happens. But I think from the experience I had with Spider-Man, I love Spider-Man 1. I really, really enjoyed that game. So hopefully Spider-Man 2 is not only a worthy sequel, but it succeeds even further from the first game and maybe any minor issues it had, and it could be a good contender. Another one, Final Fantasy 16, a personal favorite. I'm still playing. I feel like it took up a good bit of the conversation during the summertime, which is usually a dead month. Not this year, but usually the summertime is a dead time in gaming. So the game that takes up the most conversation will kind of rule that time period. Now, Diablo 4 also was very popular around that time as well. I feel like 16 really was a big part of the conversation. People kind of wanted to, they wanted to see what it's talking about. New battle system, new direction, cinematic, and mostly positively reviewed. Some people really enjoyed it. I'm really enjoying the battle system. I like going Super Saiyan and going in space and fusing and flames and giant monsters. And I had a great time. I think it could be considered in there. For my last two, I want to go with, the obvious one first, Starfield. Scope, the fan base, the hype around it. I mean, you can tell people were hungry for this game. Anytime you see somebody streaming it or watching a video, look at that comment section, they want to know everything about this game. It's been, kind of in the works for so long. And it's like, the first big new Bethesda title in a very, 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 very long time.
25
for a new iPad. Exactly. So there's a lot of build behind it. And it seems like it's mostly succeeded. We'll see how, it just came out very, very recent. We'll see how the next couple of weeks will be and how people kind of really think on in hindsight. But so far, it seems like it's sticking the landing. I think it will definitely be nominated. Big open world games like this, experiences like this, people love these things. So they'll always be considered. And my last pick, this is going to be for fun. I would really like to see Hi-Fi Rush just be nominated. It won't win. It probably will not win. But just to see it up there, again, it started top of the year. And, you have kind of top of the year syndrome where you start off hot. There are other games in that category at the very start of the year. And then there's so many other games you kind of get lost in the conversations. Yeah. But I just remember that time when it came out that day and came out that day. Everybody was excited about it. Reviewed very well. Very fun. New direction, from a studio that did horror games?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I think Hi-Fi Rush personally this is my wild card. This is my, this is my Jimmy Butler. It ain't supposed to make out the playoffs, but I hope it make it to the finals. It might not win the championship, but it's gonna make it to the finals. I'm rooting for you, Hi-Fi Rush. Prove me wrong. Let's go.
All right.
That's one of the ones on my list. Okay. Only reason I didn't say it is because I don't think it's probably gonna get audio design or visual. If it don't get one of them two, I'll be a little disappointed. But it's got at least got to get those. But game of the
audio
year,
definitely.
I agree with you on the audio, no question.
Yeah.
Terrence, what you got for us, man?
So the first one for me is going to be Baldur's Gate 3. I mean, Baldur's Gate 3 is pretty much looking like the Elden Ring of this year. It's just a game that came out and just impressed everyone, and based on the critical reviews, I think without question it's going to be on the Game of the Year discussion list without question. Next up is going to be Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. Kind of like Breath of the Wild, like you all have already said, Breath of the Wild is considered one of the greatest games of this generation, if not one of the greatest games of all time. And yeah, I mean, the fact that this game is just as good, if not better, than Breath of the Wild, it'll definitely be on the list. I think Resident Evil 4 Remake is going to be there.
That's a good one.
That's one that I think some people might have forgotten about in a sense, but that game, when it came out, we reviewed extremely well, did very well for Capcom. Yeah, in a year where we had quite a few remakes, this one I think stood above them all, and it was some might even say it's even better than the original or just as good as the original. So I think it will definitely be one of those games in the game of the year discussion, or like the game of the year list. I think Starfield will be there as well. I think not only as the Microsoft representative, but also just because the hype for this game, the fact that it actually came out as well as it did and reviewed for the most part as well as it did. I think, there's going to be some naysayers that say like, oh, this game isn't as good as, you are hyping up to be, or, oh, once again, Todd lied to us kind of thing. But I think
that's already started.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think the game will definitely be on the game of the year list. Will it win? I don't think so, just because there's so many other strong nominees, but I think it has a right to be there just based on hype and the fact that it actually came out and it's actually functional. I think those two things in and of itself is enough to get it in the game of the year category. Next up is going to be Spider-Man 2. I do think that of all the Sony games that have come out this year, that this is going to be the one to sneak in there. Will it win? I mean, that depends on how well the game is received. Like if it's on God of War 2 levels of good, I don't know. We might be able to tangle with some of them. We'll see. But if it's just as good as the first one, I think it will sneak on the list, but it won't win. So it kind of just depends on how polished the game is when it comes out. So we'll see. And the next one for me is a toss-up. I'm just doing 6 just because for the game awards they usually do 6, so I'm just going by that format. I think it's going to be a toss-up between either Diablo 4 or Sea of Stars. And I say Sea of Stars just because if we're going with the indie game being there, I think this is the one to be on the lookout for. Just based on those reviews, like this game, I'm not gonna lie, I know you had hyped up this game, Will, and I had seen all the talk about it, but to see it actually come out and review as well as it did, it's like, whoa, like this definitely caught me off guard. So I think that it has a strong possibility of being there. And if it isn't there, I think Diablo 4 will take its place just because Diablo 4 was a very strong game when it came out. I don't know how well the community is doing with it now, like if the numbers are still
Yeah, we'll get into that in just a second.
Okay, not as much. Okay, well maybe
no.
Oh well, maybe take it off then. I mean, I thought when it came out, like people were saying
right.
It was great.
You're right.
You're correct.
You're correct.
You're not wrong.
Well, okay, well, I guess if it's not doing well, take it off and just put Sea of Stars there then. All right. So there you go. Baldur's Gate 3, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, RE4, Resident Evil 4 Remake, Starfield, Spider-Man 2, and Sea of Stars. Those are the 6 for me.
I'm liking this. There is a lot of consensus that we have, and I don't think I'm going to change too much from what the consensus is. I think before all this started, I would have said Tears of the Kingdom was a lock. Like I never really cared about Tears of the Kingdom because I didn't care about Breath of the Wild. Like the way they make art games just don't line up with me. But the Nintendo brand is too strong, and everybody that is a fan said they delivered and then some. So it felt like the obvious winner for Game of the Year before the year even started was Tears of the Kingdom.
True.
Then Baldur's Gate came along and blew everybody away.
Yeah.
And got the kind of word of mouth and the absurd reviews that I was like, whoa, this game, this is a monster. Like, and just like I think just like Terrence said, that's the kind of monster that Elden Ring was. Maybe not quite at the same level, but really close. And it's just like a real role-playing game. Like, you free to be whoever you want to be. You can play it however you want to play it. Rakeem was talking to me about all the stuff that he and his brother was doing and how many different ways you could approach a situation. Like, you could do whatever you want. And so, like, Baldur's Gate 3 to me is like an easy nominee and potentially the winner. I don't know if it's going to be able to wrest control away from Tears of the Kingdom. I'm kind of rooting for it, too, just because it's always boring when, like, you have the lock come out and it's like, oh, you know, it's like the 90s Bulls. You just like, hey, man, we know y'all win.
Yeah.
But, like, look, it'd be nice if, like, the Rockets got it or something. They did.
Yeah.
If the fucking Suns could get a dub, like, fuck, like, this got out of hand. And, like, that's how it feels with Zelda. Like, you look at Zelda and you go, this is obviously going to win. And then, like, for Baldur's Gate 3 to come along and be like, oh, nah, not obviously. You got a challenger to the throne. Like, I appreciate that. So I'm rooting for Baldur's Gate 3. I do think Tears of the Kingdom is also on the list. Just the stuff that you can do in that world, the different tools that they give you to like reinvent what is, kind of well-tread ground, but like they added like all the different creation tools that you could use, and you could build whatever the fuck you wanted to build, and it just worked. Like, it didn't make any sense, but it just worked. Like, that was really smart. It was a good way of elevating, like, it was a good way of getting away from that more of the same criticism that can kind of plague sequels, like in the way that it plagued God of War Ragnarok or some of the other games that come out. As far as Sony with Spider-Man, I think Spider-Man is the one that's the most shaky. I think it's the one where you're like, okay, well, if this doesn't knock it out of the park, the original Spider-Man had some stuff, had some flaws that we kind of let it go on. It is my favorite superhero game of all time, but I would be remiss if I said, oh, this doesn't have any flaws. Like, the side content left a lot to be desired. Barely anything other than collectibles. There weren't that many supervillains. Enough, like, you did fight the Sinister Six, and I do think that, you don't need a ton of supervillains, but I do think you need enough to justify, like, okay, I'm the superhero in the superhero universe. That was my biggest flaw. Well, my second biggest flaw with Gotham Knights was that it was just like, oh, you got 4 villains. Like, what? No, I'm trying to fight a whole bunch. And in Spider-Man, for him to have the robust rogues gallery that he has, like, there's no excuse in him not having like a decent sized number of villains. And especially, like, if you're not going to have, if some of the side content is going to be lacking to that extent, then there's no excuse for you not to have like a few side villains that you can do some cool things with. So we'll see how they manage to iterate. There are some changes we've already seen, and they've been kind of tight, close to the chest with this game. Like, we've seen,
they have.
Like, we had like that one extended gameplay sequence, but other than that, like, are you telling me that Venom and Lizard and Kraven are the only villains in the game? Like, are you what's going on in this game? Like, what's some of the other stuff that we'll be able to do in this game? Like, they're really gonna have to step it up insofar as like the side content and like what fills out the rest of the world outside of that main storyline. So like, I am looking forward to. Of course, it's gonna be a looker. Of course, the performances are gonna be on point. But like, they've got a lot of work to do to prove that they belong in that same category as Baldur's Gate 3 and Tears of the Kingdom. Final Fantasy 16, I think, is a strong one. We had a whole podcast about whether or not, classic JRPGs versus whatever they're trying to do with like these new school JRPGs. And I think for the most part, it delivered. It convinced Rakeem. None of us, it convinced, like, Will, how do you feel?
How do I feel about 16?
Yeah,
I'm
you played
cool.
it, you beat
I'm
it, right?
super cool with it. Yeah, I beat it. I'm super cool with what it's doing, but I'm just not extremely like excited for like that whole shift. If that whole
if you
shift
had to rate
happens,
it like out of 10, what would you give it?
8.5.
That's still solid. That's
about how I feel.
I think that's what they gave it on. I think it's like an 86 or 87.
Yeah,
so
it's like
close.
87 on Metacritic.
It's in the high 80s. Yeah.
So in other words, y'all saying the Metacritic is about right.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, I mean, like they kind of proved the point that modern, Final Fantasy doesn't have to go anywhere. Do they need to reinvent it to that extent? Maybe, maybe not. But like, what they did do worked. You can't say that it didn't. So like, I think that game has a strong chance. So put that on there. So that's 4. Starfield. Back and forth on Starfield. I feel like it did get that 88. I feel vindicated from when Devin was like 1,000 planets, 1,000 glitches. I do feel a little vindicated, but like, do I think it belongs in the game of the year? I don't know yet. Like, I feel like that game, in the same way as Dragon Age Inquisition, the way it kind of won game of the year, and then in retrospect, people were like, that shit won game of the year. And like, to be fair, there's a contingent of people out there that love Dragon Age Inquisition to this day.
Definitely.
To this day.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's people out there that love that game. But like, there are a lot of people who are like, man, I don't know. Like, and that just, if it won game of the year, that just tells you what a weak year 2014 was for games. And like, Starfield, very much, it has plenty of flaws, man. Like, the reviews on it have been high, but there have been reviews from major outlets. There are reviewers that haven't come in yet, like Eurogamer. They haven't been allowed to touch the game. They had to buy they got a copy. They got a code like way late. So it's like, okay, well, we'll see. And like, I've heard people say the game is good, but there's also just a lot of like classic Bethesda jank. Yeah, they worked out a lot of some of the bugs, but it's also some stuff like just not having maps in the cities. and really shitty UI and just things that would hold the game back. And so I don't know. Like, I do think that they probably put it in there just off hype alone, but does it really have a chance to win it? I doubt it. Yeah. I'm on the same page as the rest of y'all. I think Sea of Stars, I wasn't really paying attention to it. Yeah, I am a pixelist or whatever you want to call it. I'm not about that pixel life, but I'm not dumb. I can see things. Like, I pay attention. Like, the ratings, the reviews on that game are insane. So I think we have a good chance of seeing that in the top. Diablo 4, I know Terrence brought it up. That game did do well at first, and I was convinced that it was going to be on the list. But then, like, it took them barely a few months of like, oh, well, here's our first big season, and they fucked it immediately. And the community is fucking livid about it. And so, like, it went from a game where I was like, oh, this is a lock for a game of the year to like, nope, just off that alone. Like, base reviews are one thing, but like, you got to, if you're a live service game, and it kind of is, kind of not, but like, it, you know, yeah, if you do constant content, you're kind of a live service game. And like, if you botch the live service game within the first fucking year, like, the year's not even over with. If you botch the live service
it came out in June and it botched it. We just reached September.
Correct, sir.
That's crazy.
That's why when you was like, did something happen? Like, yeah, something definitely happened. Like, it was high on it, and then like they started making some changes, and people was immediately like, "What the fuck did you do to this game?" And so like that game probably gets pushed to the side. Speaking of, well, actually, Will, I want your 6 or 3.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and get the obvious one out of the way. For Nintendo, definitely Tears of the Kingdom. I don't know what else on the system aside from what's getting ready to come up for the system, such as Super Mario Brothers Wonder, or I don't know, maybe if they really feel a certain way, Super Mario RPG Remake gets that nod. You never know. I know it's a real. That would be really delightful. I know it's a spicy one too for a lot of people, but if it show up now. But for Xbox, definitely Starfield. Starfield is where it is at for that system right now. That has so many people talking, and you mentioned about how they're talking about the reviews and how you said Eurogamer, right?
Yeah, they haven't got a chance to touch it yet.
See, they hadn't had a chance to touch it, but then I started seeing some reviews here and there because I'm possibly terminally online. I've seen quite a few things on Twitter where people were talking about the reviews, how they're sliding through. Like, I'm like, oh, it's in the high 80s, mid 80s. That's pretty solid. But then I'm seeing something they're like, if you were looking for a Bethesda game, you got it. This is a Bethesda game. You're going to enjoy it if that's what you were looking for. So I'm just like, okay, that makes sense. So Starfield for Xbox. Now for Sony, we pretty much got a consensus here because in my head, because the way I look at the Game Awards later on for Game of the Year and whatnot, is how they kind of do a bit of a recency bias when it comes to certain games. I looked at it and I thought about when Spider-Man 2 was coming out, and I was like, Spider-Man 2 could most certainly just about take that, just based on the fact that it just hit the shelf a little bit before the show happened, and it more than likely will walk away with it. But a personal of mine, just like with King, Final Fantasy 16, I love that game. I do, and I intend on doing my second run soon because I want to get that platinum trophy. And I gotta be real. Final Fantasy 16 did its job and more.
And the DLC announcement today was pretty cool.
That means I just got more time with the game, which I definitely ain't got no problem with. I ain't got no problem with that. So shout out to Yoshi P and the crew. Let's see. My other ones that I would have to say are definitely it's gonna be Sea of Stars. Hadn't started it yet, but when they posted, they sold 100K in one day, and then they posted their wall of reviews on the image, all of them borderline 9s, 10s, hundreds out of hundreds. And I'm just sitting there like, this game just came out and y'all did 100K in one day and y'all reviews are sitting this high.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's gotta be Game of the Year material if I've ever seen it. And Sea of Stars has a chance to sit there and look pretty. So Sabotage Studios, y'all did amazingly. And this ain't number like what? Partially half a week since the game been out.
That's true. That first game was amazing too. The Messenger was really good.
Yeah, I've heard great things about that too. So Sabotage, I'm ready to see y'all keep working. Y'all got mine. You got my money already. So expect me to play the game. My last one, I wanted to throw this one out there because I thought about it. I was like, maybe this one could appear. I guess it'll just be a personal kind of like wild card in its own way. I don't know. But I wanted to say Blasphemous 2. I'm throwing that out there as a real oddball one. Yes, it is more of a Metroidvania style game, but it is it's a Souls-ish type of game. And I know a lot of people kind of get tired of seeing those, but I think what makes Blasphemous stand out from most is the way it presents its story, because there is a very deep and dark story behind the first game and this one. You are someone called the Penitent One, and there's so much stuff in that game that I think would kind of sit well with a lot of people. So I kind of want to see that game just kind of touch the list, maybe, possibly, hopefully. I don't know, but I don't disagree with Diablo 4 either. But they kind of, they kind of built the house of cards up and then kind of kicked it right after the fact. They were just like, yeah,
Knocked
it
that
was like,
bitch over.
hey. They were just like, hey.
They built their
Diablo
house
4.
on what was it? They built their house on sand.
Yeah,
they
the rocks
they
crashed
on
against
sand.
it, and
Yeah.
That was that. Oh, and
Yeah.
I ain't gonna disrespect Baldur's Gate 3 either, because of the way
Base
that,
game's
the way
good,
that I'm glad to hear it. But the way Baldur's Gate 3 been getting talked about recently, whoo, y'all got me wanting to buy it. So why not?
I'm going
Throw it on
to
the list
eventually
too.
go back and pick that game up just because I'm curious to see. Like I was like, I looked into it and I was
Yeah.
like, I don't know, like that. I'm not really a top down type of gamer unless it's like, strategy game or whatever. Shout out Trails, shout out Triangle Strategy, shout out Jagged Alliance 3, shout out a lot of those like top down isometric strategy games. But like I wasn't really interested in like a RPG being like, oh yeah, it's top down. But then like them reviews was crazy. I said, well, I might be missing some shit. I don't know. So I'm very curious. You say what?
I hear there's a mod is like behind the shoulder.
Yeah, there is
that.
one.
So I may just, install the mod and see how it plays from there.
Yes, sir.
So now I have to ask the question, because we've talked about basically the same 8 games, maybe 8 or 9 games max.
Mm-hmm.
There have been way more great games than that to come out this year.
Of course,
like way more. And so now I got to ask y'all, what game do you feel like it's going to be left out? It definitely shouldn't be. One game that Terrence brought up that nobody else brought up that I agree off rip, Resident Evil 4 Remake in any other year would be a Game of the Year nominee lock. Game of the Year? Probably not, but nominee? Absolutely. And I think this year it might get squeezed off. And even if it didn't, there's another game that's going to get squeezed off that shouldn't be. Terrence, what game do you feel like is going to be left out and you're like, this shouldn't be left out?
So we're just talking one game, right?
You can have 2, whatever.
Okay.
Whichever ones.
So the main one for me, in any other year, I think this game would at least be game of the year. It would be a nominee. Would it win? I don't think so, just because traditionally this genre doesn't win game of the year, but I think it would still be on the list. And that's Street Fighter 6.
Yep.
Street Fighter 6.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that we could say that Street Fighter 6 has revitalized single player for fighting games. Like the way they did their story mode, the way that they just did content for the game, period. Like the game is feature rich. It's like the first fighting game in a very long time that isn't NRS made, that is fully packed and can be played by anyone. Whether you're someone who only plays fighting games for the multiplayer and like the competitive aspect of it, or you're someone who wants to jump off into the story mode and just play it for that, you could do either or and you'll get a great experience either way. Like it's a fully featured game, and I do think that in any other year it would definitely be a nominee, but in this year, unfortunately, I don't think it'll more than likely win best fighting game, depending on how
Absolutely.
MK1 does. Usually, historically, Street Fighter usually gets more accolades than MK in that kind of regard, but we'll see. That depends on how MK1 is. But yeah, in terms of it being a Game of the Year nominee, I just don't think that's going to happen. I'll just stick with that for now, because I have a feeling that the other game that I'm thinking about is probably going to be brought up by somebody else, and if it isn't, maybe I'll shout it out at the end. But yeah, I think that's the big one for me is Street Fighter 6.
Okay. That is a
Nice.
great choice. I have a long list, so I'm just gonna stick to like 1 or 2 of them. But like Street Fighter 6 was absolutely on my list of games where I'm like, this should be Game of the Year material, nominee material. But like, it's just such a strong year. It's hard for And like you say, like there are certain genres that just kind of tend not to get the nod in the first place. They certainly don't win. And fighting games is definitely one of them, like it or not. Keem, what's your what game you feel like, why is this not here?
I have 2 games on my list, and they're very, very simple for me because I enjoyed playing both of them very much. The first one is going to be Jedi Survivor. I believe this game got ruined by its own. It got in its own way because of the launch. The bug issues with the launch overshadowed how freaking good that game is. That game is excellent. It has a great battle system. It has a great story. It's content rich. You have so much exploration. I had so much fun exploring that game. The characters, the story, the events, tone, everything spot on. I liked everything about it. The villains were good. Getting to the end of the game and like how certain characters betrayed you and how they were portrayed. Like that game is really, really good. And it's going to be overshadowed because only thing people remember about that game is that it was buggy at launch. And in this era we're living in, like gamers are jaded. We're tired of seeing the same issues come up over and over again. I saw this recently with a game I got into a couple weeks ago, Wayfinder, a new MMO by Airship Syndicate, which is like their big new game. And then you couldn't get into the game. You know, things like that. Like, no matter how good this game turns out to be, it could, a year from now, this could be like one of the most content-rich live service MMO whatever games ever, and people will be like, "Screw that! I couldn't play the game for 2 weeks, so it doesn't matter. If the game don't work, I don't care." I had the same issue with Outrider, so I totally understand. Jedi Survivor is the first one on that list by far. I think that game would definitely be a nomination lock, and honestly, and I still think it should be. Honestly, I really think it's that quality of a game. Unfortunately, the bugs hamper that. Second game, and this is for a completely different reason. Actually, Armored Core 6. I had to bring this game up because I've been playing it every day since it came out, and I can't stop thinking about it. Armored Core is not a series that historically reviews well.
Calling me.
Yes, and calling me. Armored Core is not a series that traditionally reviews well. It doesn't do well with critics. It's very niche and it's very FromSoft. So it has a degree of difficulty. The story is you have to get in, in the background. And it's a series that you don't have human characters you interact with a lot. Well, you have people you talk to all the time. People talk all the time, but you don't see a human. That's the gimmick of the game. Like it's a representation of corporations and like how they've dehumanized people and everything's about money and power and control to the ruinization of society. That is what the series is about. But person playing that doesn't really understand that. You don't see people or the story's contrived in a different way and it has difficulty. It's hard to interpret. But what this game does, it has one of the most satisfying gameplay loops I have ever experienced. The tinkering you can do with your mech on this level. Every part, customizing it to the T per mission, moving between like fighting bosses and enemies, going from mission to mission, tweaking your mech speed, its height, its verticality, its weight, everything is so satisfying. It's like being a 6-year-old boy again, playing with your toys and trying to get your Power Ranger set up in a certain angle and have everything decorated, or model kits with Gundam and getting everything painted and tailored and things. Like, it becomes your baby. And it's like such a cool gameplay loop that you don't get from other games. Mech games especially are very underrepresented in gaming as it is today, where maybe in the past it had pretty good representation. That is not the case now. So like getting that experience for me is very special. I think this game is high quality. Not only is it high quality, it has the complete opposite of Jedi Survivor, which I just mentioned. It runs at 120 frames per second. It is no bugs, no issues.
On PS5?
No, on PC. Now, of course, not on PS5.
Like, Christ,
yeah. But it's widescreen support.
That alone.
It has widescreen support. It runs at 120 on PC. Like, I think it runs a solid, 60 on PS5. Like, this game has no issues. None. Zero. Zip. So if you want a polished, strong, straightforward game that gets a really addicting gameplay loop, Armored Core is that game. But those aren't the type of things that people, think about when they're going to Game of the Year necessarily. It's not going to have the bombastic story. It's not going to have the best graphics, but it has a satisfying gameplay loop that I haven't experienced in a very long time. And as a result, I feel like it's It's not going to be represented in game of the year. And I feel that's a shame. I think it should be.
Okay, that's a very. I kind of figured those would be your choices, but I mean they're very strong choices, and it just indicates just how insane of a year this is for it to be like, hey man, these two games are some of the best games of the last decade, and like they ain't gonna even be talked about in game of the year conversations. Like, what? That seems unfair. But I mean, like that's kind of the side effect of all the games from last year being delayed into this year, all this COVID stuff, and like games being, coming out a year, 2 years later than people planned on it. It's kind of a side effect. Like you kind of that it goes with it. Like some games are just gonna get left out. Devin, I know you got at least one that we talked about earlier this year. What game do you feel like is gonna get left out, and like, hey man, it should be left out?
Well, I'm not even gonna mention Hi-Fi Rush because we already mentioned that earlier. So, but that is one that I do think that I mean, that is a great game. That's another game where like Rakeem said, Aura Core 6 is polished. There's no glitches, no bugs. It runs buttery smooth. Like it was just an awesome game. But I don't think, and I mean, it had a lot of hype when it first came out, but I think it was going to kind of get shoved aside. But like I said, it has got to at least get the visual nomination or audio design. If it don't get audio design at this, I think something rigged because there's nothing. If you experience that game and you see how they integrate sound into literally the entire game, but anyway, I have about a list of 7. Actually, Rakeem I was gonna say Jedi Survivor, and I was like, I should have known he would have mentioned it because he played the game.
I did,
but I think Dead Space, the Dead Space remake, and
that's the one that I was thinking of, and I figured you would mention it, so I just left it for you.
It's unfortunate that Callisto just laid a turd on the ground and tripped over it and fell in it and then rolled in it again. But and Dead Space had to come in clean up after them. But that game was received pretty well. It did really well. Just like RE4 was a game that people like, especially horror fans, they were waiting for it to have a remake, and it did well. Hopefully we can get some more of it, like maybe remake the second one. But I do think that because if I'm not mistaken, I think
no remake of that second one. That team is working on Iron Man, and goddamn it better be good.
I mean, if they got the dude in the suit down, so if they add some good flight to it, I mean, they actually kind of have some they got the zero gravity stuff, so they can make it fun.
I was like, I have no interest, like negative interest in any horror game, but I was like, let's see what this looked like since he did kind of walk around in armor, and I liked I kind of like the heavy sound of him walking around and like the movement mechanics and shit like that, and like I even like some of the weapons that I was saying. I'm like, if y'all could like take out all this creepy shit and add a few extra weapons and like nail some of like the Iron Man villains, like this, y'all might have.
They even have your menu literally like is a hollow thing from your suit, which was at the time was one of the coolest things ever. It's like, wait, I don't have to press start and go to a separate. I'm literally walking and like doing stuff while the menus. I'm like, that was groundbreaking. So I think that's gonna be one to be left off. Now these other two, I want to mention Remnant 2 because that was also another game that people
another one I played
really loved. Yeah, really loved, and it was a big upgrade from the first game, and it was highly received when it came out. But I think the one that I'm going to pick is a game that I'm actually ready for. It comes out in about 3 weeks or so. Is Lies of P.
Yep.
I think Lies of P is going to do really well. It's going to be a really solid Souls-like, but I don't think it's going to be one of them games that just kind of skates on. It's not going to be a Game of the Year nominee. But I do think it has that potential to be. This game, I mean, obviously we just got off the high of Elden Ring. So if you got a Souls, at this point, it's almost like if you got a Souls game, it has to be on that caliber. And Lies of P is something that's going to be tamed down a bit. It's more like Bloodborne. It's not like this super open world. It's just a experience that's more similar to Bloodborne, but it's not. It's more contained. So I think that alone is just going to it's going to be a solid game. I played the demo. It feels pretty good, but I don't think it's going to get that Game of the Year nominee, even though it could have that potential to. It's going to slide right under it. But those are my two, Dead Space and Lies of P.
Okay. Will, what you got for us, man?
Okay, so it took me a minute to think on that about like what could kind of appear in a listing, just something that's not going to appear, but something that kind of maybe should get a nod. And I think I kind of got a couple personal ones I would go for. And the main one I started looking at least right now, because it's getting ready to come out, is Mortal Kombat 1.
Ooh.
And I say that. I say that one strictly because while yes, it is a fighting game, just like Terrence said, fighting games don't really get that nod as a game of the year type of thing. But with the way NRS kind of steps their game up between each game, well, like they picked it up in MK9, expanded on it in 10, did it again in 11, and now we got this reboot right here. And I'm just like, I bet they're gonna make this work like really, really well. I'm pretty sure this is gonna like turn out very good. The whole timeline reboot, have characters in different places than what they're used to being, kind of turn some people's expectations and like do different things with the characters. I think MK1 could have definitely seen the light of day as a game of the year, maybe when it comes out. Hopefully it does really well. Hopefully it stands pretty tall next to Street Fighter 6. I hope it does, truthfully, because I hope they just have it. I know you do. And and there's 3 more that I'm gonna give like kind of like quick rapid fire. I know that's a lot, but I'm gonna
jack one of mine.
I may or may not. We're gonna see. But one I want to throw out is an indie game that I've seen a lot of people really liking at first, and I liked it. I was like, I kind of want to play this now because it looked kind of relaxing. It don't like a game where you just kind of, be stressing, and that's Dave the Diver.
God damn it! All right, you got 2. That's it. Shit. It's like nobody gonna bring up Dave the Diver.
Every time I see
you thought. I thought.
I've heard people talk about the game a lot.
Yeah, man.
It's got a high ass Metacritic score. OpenCritic, like I think it's a 92 on OpenCritic. So yeah. I mean, good choice, Will. And you are like the indie guy, so good choice, bro.
Yeah, it's a choice I chose because I watch a lot of people play it. I'm like, bro, I might have to buy this because this looked like a really good relaxing time. And then I just seen information on it that in like a week's time it sold upwards of 1 million. And I'm just like, I was like, y'all indie developers are not playing out here. Y'all swinging for the fences and for the car windows, bro. That's crazy. Like y'all want us to see. The other 2 games I was gonna throw out there just to kind of go ahead and get a move on was even though it didn't get a lot of talk, Octopath 2.
God damn it! Look now, shit. Everybody got 2.
Okay, if that's the case, I'm gonna leave it at that because the next one I mentioned, you definitely more than likely would have had. So I'm through.
Okay, look, I had a hella long list, most of which y'all took. I had Armored Core, I had Diablo 4, but I mean, like when I thought about it, I was like, nah, get that out of here. I had Hi-Fi Rush, Street Fighter 6, Octopath Traveler 2. I'm literally reading them in order. Sea of Stars, Dave the Diver, Lies of P, Super Mario Wonder. I don't think it's gonna make it. Nobody else said that. I think somebody said it for like, Rakeem said it. He thinks it might make it. Yeah. I don't think it'll make it. I think we've kind of got to a point where it's like, okay, well, you don't want to overrepresent one company, one console publisher. So I don't think that game makes it. The other games I had were Dead Space Remake and Jagged Alliance 3. Jagged Alliance 3 is like probably the first big strategy game that we've seen. And it carries on like a long tradition of Jagged Alliance games, most of which have been disappointing. They were usually like spinoffs and they just never quite got the feel of Jagged Alliance 1 and 2. Jagged Alliance 3 kind of nailed it, and everybody seems to love it like quite a bit. It did have like kind of low-ish scores, not low as like low, but like I think it's like an 82 or something on OpenCritic. So as opposed to like usually the 85, 87 or something like that. So, but yeah, I mean, I think those are the games that are most likely to get left out, that deserve it. If I had to pick anything else, I would say it's probably Trails to Azure. I don't know. They're in kind of a weird spot with those Trails games right now because so many of them have come out and not been like really strong like that. I think the problem with the Trails games is that because they were out years ago and they're just now coming over today, it's like, well, can we count those for like new releases? And so when you have that, it's like, all right, well, we just not going to put them on the list. So I think that's why Zero wasn't on it last year, despite being one of the best JRPGs of last year. And that's why Azure won't be anywhere near it this year, despite being one of the best games this year. Reverie is just, it's too much for the home crowd. Trails to Reverie, Trails. Is it Trails to Reverie?
Yeah, it's
Or
Trails
just
into
Trails
Reverie.
of Reverie?
Trails into
Trails
Reverie.
into Reverie.
Trails into Reverie. That's it. Thank you.
Mhm.
I think Trails into Reverie is just too much for the home crowd. Like it's so much of like, oh, have you played all these other games? Did you like them? Were you like really into it? Are you like me and Rakeem where we start talking about like random NPCs that have no meaning that Falcom just remembered inexplicably? Like if you're one of those people, this game is for you. And amongst those kind of fans, like you see like really high scores, but amongst people who are just like, hey, it's fine. It's a okay RPG series. Like you see like the lower scores, and that's why overall, like on Metacritic, it got like an 80 or whatever. And so like I don't think that makes it just because it's way too strong of a year, and even in a weaker year, you wouldn't see anything like that. What's up, Terrence?
I was just gonna say, just to give myself, I guess, a second one, just real quick. I honestly don't believe Final Fantasy 16 is going to be on the Game of the Year list. I just don't. I think in the same way that Final Fantasy 7 Remake, when it came out, it achieved pretty much the same kind of like critical score, that 87, high 80 range. I just don't think, in the same way that it didn't get like a Game of the Year nomination, it got Best RPG, but in this year we have Baldur's Gate 3 and we have a bunch of RPGs that have come out. So I think, unfortunately, this is just the wrong year for Final Fantasy 16. It just isn't gonna.
You think? Are you saying? And this is a little weird of a question to ask. Are you saying like Resident Evil 4 kind of takes that spot instead?
Like it's
because I know Baldur's Gate's kind of like a Western RPG and it's kind of had its own thing. So to me, I feel like it's Resident Evil 4 that like will come in and be like, nah, you ain't getting this time. I'm the big Japanese game on the property.
I guess if we're talking like a specific spot, out of the 6 I mentioned, I guess, yeah, I mean, I guess it'd be between, it'd be like Resident Evil 4 Remake, Starfield, or Final Fantasy 16. It's like those 3 are kind of tossing up there, and I think RE4 out of all those would definitely be there. I mean, it scored the highest.
So so to you, it's like a musical chairs kind of thing, and of the musical chairs, like Final Fantasy 16 is gonna be the one that's like, hey, you ain't gonna spot, bro.
I guess if I had to compare it to those games, yeah, I guess. I just don't think Final Fantasy 16 in general is just going to be on the Game of the Year nom list, just because it's just in the nature of the year that we're in. I don't think it came out strong enough to make it. If it was a couple points higher, if it had just made it to like that 90 range, then I think we'd be talking. But it's just close enough that it's not.
Now what's
it's
possible,
so close yet so far.
It's crazy. I saw people say this, make this exact argument elsewhere online. What's possible is that they just look at the games that got like a 90, and actually, since we're here and we do have a few spare seconds, let me see something, because I'm very curious as to
that. I mean, honestly, that's kind of how I did this. Is that I looked at the Metacritic score for a lot of these games, and yeah, there's a lot of them there in like the high 90s, and unfortunately, 16 doesn't touch that area enough.
Yeah.
If we're looking at what gets a 90,
which honestly, you could make the same argument for Starfield. You really could, but I think Starfield might get there just because of Bethesda and Microsoft.
It may not make it.
Yeah,
it
might
may not make it. It just depends.
Yeah.
Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I'm looking at OpenCritic, just so everybody knows. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom at a 96. Baldur's Gate 3 at a 96. Metro Prime Remastered won't make it.
Yeah, I didn't think
Videoverse is like a new game that came out not too long ago. That got like a 92. That could be indie representation, maybe. Kind of came out of nowhere, right? Resident Evil 4 Remake, 92. Tents and Trees. I don't know what the fuck that is. Don't make me cap. Street Fighter 6. That one.
Reviewed very well.
You could do both. You could just have Resident Evil 4 and Street Fighter 6 and be like, hey, man, Capcom God
is running stuff, man.
I put it this way, like, hey, if Capcom were able to pull that off, it'd be one hell of a year for them.
Now, what's interesting is that if you take Tears of the Kingdom, Baldur's Gate 3, Resident Evil 4, Videoverse, because it is up there, Street Fighter 6, you still only have 5, and the remaining titles I just don't see them making it. Like one of the titles in the 90 range is like Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Future Redeemed. And like, I'm sorry, I love Xenoblade Chronicles 3, but like we not add no expansion pass,
I was gonna
no
say, yeah,
goddamn
that's
game of the year.
expansion.
No.
Yeah.
So
I
They
mean,
have their
at
own.
that point, then you
They
might
have their own category anyway.
Yeah, at that point, you'd have to talk about Cyberpunk, which might do well with that. So
I was thinking
Phantom
about
Liberty, yeah.
that one. Yeah.
So I guess the only like the first game right out of that, well, not out of that, but like there is a range of games that hit that 89 rank. Sea of Stars, Dave the Diver, Hi-Fi Rush, Dead Space, like all of those hit that 89 rank, and so those are all possible. And that would indeed leave out Final Fantasy 16. It also leave out quite a few other games. I think that would leave out Starfield because Starfield's like 88.
Yeah.
It would probably leave out. I don't see even if it's good, I think 89 is pushing it for Spider-Man 2. But I still think it makes it there just because I think Jeff probably, if it's good enough, he probably wants to do like look, we got to have a Sony, we got to have a Microsoft. He does kind of play nice with all three publishers just to have people there. I would be surprised. Like now it's kind of worked out in his favor the last few years because there's always been some big Microsoft game, some big Nintendo game, some big Sony game, and like if they have one, he just puts it there, like Psychonauts 2 a few years back. That was in there. So like it's kind of worked out in his favor that they always have something strong. And I think this year again, they have something strong. They have two things strong. Like in fact, Hi-Fi Rush could just be there. Like you ain't got to put Starfield, you just be like Hi-Fi Rush. But that would create kind of a explosion of like rage for people because people would be like Hi-Fi Rush instead of Starfield, which I mean, like to me, it didn't really
you
matter.
putting this cartoon BS up in the game of the year discussion for?
What man?
Shit, let's not start that. Oh, it's a cartoon nonsense. What's up, Keem?
Look, after Vampire Survivors last year, I think everybody should shut up on like what the game looks like.
I swear they better shut the hell up on that.
I mean, like,
Survivors is that crack.
I think it's fine. Like if it's not gonna happen this way, but if Hi-Fi Rush were to make it over Starfield, I'd be fine with it. Like ultimately, the sales expectations and all of that stuff is gonna look different. And like regardless which one makes it, I don't think either one of them stands a chance in winning. I think that's at this point kind of a 2-horse race. Tears of the Kingdom, Baldur's Gate 3. I think that's the race right now. And Spider-Man, maybe if it like really goes the extra mile in terms of adding additional content, like villains and like doing like meaningful side content, then it only like it nails everything else and then nails the stuff that it missed last time. Then and only then does it have a chance at this.
It has to be on God of War 2 levels. It has to be like a 93, 94 on Metacritic or something like that before it like gets really into that discussion. So yeah,
absolutely.
I agree.
Hey man, I think what we forgot about though, that doggone Stickman 3, man. That Stickman 3 come out of nowhere. Hey, get a doggone 97 million.
Oh my God. You said 97? Highest score on Metacritic, highest score on OpenCritic. My God. I don't know, man.
Infinity.
There might be another indie game that comes out in the next, because I think it's really just 3 months, right? Like you get, of course, the remainder of September, all of October, and a good portion of November, and I think that's it. So like there are some games that are just going to get left off. It's not even like, it's possible. I don't know what the cutoff date is. It's possible that Super Mario RPG doesn't make it, even if it is a great game, just off the strength of like, hey man, good luck with that. Like it came out in November 20th or some shit like that, and it's just not gonna make it. That'd be sad for me, but I'd be fine with it. Terrence, you got one more thing you wanted to say? It looks like.
No, I'm good. That's it.
Oh, okay, my bad. Okay. I think that's gonna wrap up this week's discussion. I am looking forward to seeing what the Game of the Year nominees are going to be. Of course, we are going to do a full Game of the Year prediction, the Game Awards prediction. When the actual nominees drop, we'll go ahead and talk about what we think is going to get what we think is going to win. That'll be, some weeks from now. But until then, if you like this episode, I need a few things from you. I need you to do us a favor and hit that subscription button on YouTube. Go ahead and hit that notification bell while you're at it. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on TikTok. Don't just check us out. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everybody. Tell your coworkers. You don't know, you might make a new friend. And do me a personal favor. Have an excellent week. Peace.
There's too many damn games to play.